All right. Good morning, Doug. More updates today. I think we should focus a bit on what's happening in Russia because it's still accelerating. It seems like, and the most obvious place you see it now, where we didn't see this 2 weeks ago, is just that the commodity markets have gone nuts. And I asked you on Friday if this was how unprecedented these changes were, and I just wanted to see there's been some more movement in it. What do you think? What are your thoughts on it right now?
Well, it is all-time highs for wheat, for instance, but that makes sense because Ukraine and Russia are massive wheat exporters. Far cry from back in the 70s when these places were Soviet and they had to import massive quantities of wheat. But people say, well, what do I care if wheat goes up? I mean, it's not going to take any bread off my table, as it were. But that's because we're rich Americans. The last time this happened was in roughly 2011, and it set off all those riots and regime changes in North Africa and the Middle East. And this time it's higher and much more serious because it's not just wheat and soybeans that are hitting on, and they might go a lot higher. But
go a lot higher, yeah.
Higher, and it's creating distortions throughout the markets because a lot of soybeans and corn, especially, are fed to cattle. Well, on the one hand, it's costing a lot more to feed cattle in feedlots, which is mostly where they're fed. I mean, that's number one. But number two, the average guy who now has to pay, what, 100, 150 even to fill up his pickup truck, he can't afford beef anymore. No more $20 steaks. So demand for cattle is going down while the supply is the current supply. In other words, feedlots want to move these bad boys out because they're too expensive to feed. Lots of distortions being created.
Yeah. And then you can go one step earlier up the food chain to the fertilizer, which we talked about. We talked about that a few times over the last few weeks. But Russia is a huge producer of fertilizer, and they have, they cut off exports, and China cut off exports of fertilizer a couple of months ago too. So if you can't get the fertilizer, then the yields go down, and then the what you use to feed the animals, becomes more scarce. And I mean, it's really the cascading failures in this complex system are amazing. I mean, and dangerous and scary.
Everything is very, very interrelated today, so that anything can happen, and it'll probably get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
So,
well, normally in the markets, when you see these huge moves, though, like wheat was up 40% last week. I mean, that's an incredible move, in a week. And a lot of times when you see a big move like that, you think it's like, it's kind of like a blow off, like toward the end of it. But there's reason to think, as you were just suggesting, that prices could go up a lot from here.
yes, the only thing that has not really bitten the dust yet has been the American stock market. And of course, when it does, then the cat's really out of the bag, because the average guy doesn't follow the prices of commodities. I mean, he doesn't think that milk comes from cows. He thinks it comes from gardens. That's what it hears from. And incidentally, milk prices, which have a limited, they're traded on the futures exchange, but it's a very illiquid market. Milk prices are also hitting all-time highs at this point too.
What isn't? Is there anything in the commodities complex that's not hitting all-time highs at this point? I mean, silver, obviously.
I would say that silver is an excellent place to be. So what am I doing now? Same thing as I have been. I have been selling oil puts, gold puts, silver puts. Those are my main positions, frankly. I mean, I didn't participate in the grain markets because it's just way too volatile anything can happen. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to take a slow and steady approach to trading commodities, as opposed to try to make $1 million this year at the risk of losing a million or maybe 2 million.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I know I've told you before, but I was scared straight with trading commodities directly in the financial crisis. So after that, I was like, not for me, not for me. So I don't do that stuff anymore. But so when you're trading, trading these puts, though, what sort of time frame are you trading? Are you trading stuff just a couple weeks from now expiration, or like 2 months from
Yeah,
expiration?
generally speaking, it's when you're selling options, and I almost always sell, rarely buy. And as I've said before, but it's worthwhile repeating, their options are a wasting asset. Time is your enemy. So what I try to do is sell nearby, out of the money options. And when I do that, all I have to do is not be very right, which you have to be. You have to be very right when you buy an option. I just have to be not very wrong. And I'll make money when I'm selling options. Now, on the other hand, I'm acting as a casino, the house in a casino. I'm acting as an insurance company, if you would. So one of the problems that most people have that get into trading commodities is not only a lack of experience, we'd probably get that, but a lack of capital, so that they're forced to do things against their better judgment because their broker says you don't have adequate margin. So a couple of tricks of the trade for commodities. And I do think, and of course you can trade commodity ETFs, but once again, the odds are tilted against you with these commodity ETFs. There's a lot of internal slippage because they're using futures contracts. And so I like to do the contracts themselves, but it's tricky. And I do recommend that people that are in a position kind of dip their fingers in the water to gain some familiarity, because this kind of craziness is going to go on, I think, for years to come. So you don't have to bet the farm on anything right now, but it's wise to gain the expertise to allow you to do so later on when you the pitch comes across the plate.
Well, the total rookie way I've been playing commodities, just because I don't have a lot of confidence in trading them directly, is that there's a fund that I bought, I guess in the fall. It's DBC. It's Invesco's DB Commodity Index Tracking Fund, and it's just a basket of different commodities from crude oil to zinc. I mean, it's got a whole bunch of different things in there. It's got some silver. It's got everything: corn, soybeans. And you do lose money with the turnover of futures contracts, but because everything has just exploded up in price, I mean, this fund since the fall is up about 50%. So for me, in the low risk way, I wanted to have some exposure to it. It was one way to do it, but I know if I were more intelligent, I would be using a different approach. I know.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, I've said for many, many years, is that you ought to be constantly accumulating gold and silver coins in cash, physical, your own possession, basically. That's worked out very well, and it will continue to work out well. So that's another thing people should do. But right now, gold stocks are the best bargains in the investment world. And, if you want to speculate, I think choosing gold stocks are.
Yeah. And we did do a report a few months ago, or I guess about 6 months ago, where you mentioned some specific gold stocks in there. And if there'll be a link in the description of this video, if you're not on the email list already, you sign up for it, you'll get a copy of that report. And the ones that you suggested like 6 or 8 months ago now, which I think just marked time for basically most of that 6 months until recently they started to really move.
Well, interestingly, in the market, you wouldn't know this from looking at the S&P, which has been flat for some time, but technology stocks, let me see if I get this quite correct. About 40% of stocks that are classed as technology stocks are down by 50% or more over the last 6
Wow.
months. Now, that's not reflected in the Dow Jones or the S&P, but people that have been in technology stocks, which is actually where the public has been,
Yep.
they've gotten creamed, quite frankly.
Hmm. And where's that money rotated into then, as it's gone out of the tech stocks to keep the S&P basically the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer because it hasn't really rotated into the gold stocks. I mean, they're up, but
Not yet.
in the past, these gold stocks are quite capable of moving 10% per day, 20% per day, and doing that for a long time until by the end of the bull market, they're up not just 10%, they're up 10 times, with some individual stocks going up 100 times, and some stocks, unbelievable as this may seem, going up 1,000 times, not in the over 20 years or over the course of a lifetime, which is itself tremendous.
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm talking in the course of, a 3 or 4 year bull market. This has actually happened. It's actually happened to me. It's happened to me. Where
That's
so
it
could happen again.
And that's why it's important to be a speculator, because you get a couple of those in your lifetime, and then don't make any terrible mistakes otherwise, and you'll be set.
Pretty much. The main thing you have to worry about is people like Klaus Schwab, who I guess, as we were talking about beforehand, is most of our listeners will know who he is, but the head of the founder of the World Economic Forum. It turns out, actually, I did a little bit of research on him, and it turned out that he was at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland, where I went to school my junior year. He was there a couple of years before I was, so I came within an RKH of meeting Klaus, actually, at Fribourg.
Just imagine. Yeah, too bad he wasn't, riding around with you in a Ferrari as you took as a truck went in the wrong lane. If you guys became buddies and he was in the truck with you, killed him.
On a blind curve, you're right. If Klaus and I had become good buddies when my car met that truck on that blind curve and cut the carburetors off the top of my engine, could have changed world history, actually.
So, yeah. How close the fates take us to saving us.
That's right.
That's funny. It's funny. So one of the things that's happened just quickly with Russia, I think it's worth talking about, is that the only really big news, I guess there's two items of big news I think they've changed in the last few days. And one is that Russia announced that they were going to disconnect their internal internet from the external internet, and that is going to happen on March 11th. And they gave companies essentially 5 days to get all their servers, within Russia, or else they were going to lose access to them. And it seems to me, and I think I'm not the only one who thinks this, that that's it's a defensive maneuver, or in anticipation of potential cyber attacks. Speaking of Klaus Schwab and his calls for a coming cyber pandemic, this seems kind of ominous, that they're taking this sort of action because it's a defensive measure, I think.
It makes a lot of sense. And so perhaps the next measure on the part of the elite that do things that are best for us is to close down the internet, or perhaps to license users of it so that quote unquote bad guys can't do bad things to the internet. So
right.
Next thing to look out for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, and we need something to fight this dis, and malinformation, which apparently is the latest terrorist scourge to hit the world. So, as absurd as that is. And then the other thing I saw
I hate being concerned about things like that. When I talk to my dogs, incidentally, here's a little Ninjarella. I don't know if you
should point the camera down just a little bit so we can see her.
Oh, yes.
Just tip the monitor down. There you go.
I'm sure if she met Jeff Berwick's Lucy, their main subject of conversation wouldn't be the economy and politics. It would be whether tacos are better than empanadas, and Reggie would take the empanada side of that argument. But other than that, I'm sure they're best of friends.
Yes, I have no doubt. Yeah, no, it's the craziest in the world is. I really think this next month, though, is going to be very interesting, Doug, at least. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, not just the next month, it's going to be the next year, and actually the next decade. The cat is really out of the bag at this point. Things could really spin out of control. And, it's not, and as Nassim Taleb said, and famously coined the concept of the Black Swan. There are undoubtedly black swans out there. These are unknown unknowns, but there are plenty of gray swans, as I like to call them, out there that are known unknowns. Like at some point when commodity prices get too high, the average Pakistani and the average Indian, his standard of living falls too far. Will the governments of those two countries get angry at each other and launch a nuclear war there? Now that would be a gray swan the size of of Rodin, the pteranodon. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things that people aren't even considering right now, like that.
But the casting failure thing, though, it's there. I mean, the wheat price is getting too high in Egypt. It's into something else. I mean, yeah, it's very hard to predict at this point. But it really is interesting. It is getting exciting, I have to say. And not good exciting, but certainly exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but that old Chinese saying, they say, may you live in interesting times. Did we talk about that the last time?
You mentioned it in passing. Yeah, you said it's not actually Chinese saying.
It's not. It actually was coined about 40 years ago. Nobody's sure by who. And it was attributed to an old Chinese curse, but it wasn't. And the meme picked up. But it's funny how memes get picked up, because before we went on the air, we were talking about various memes and how they're picked up in various places. Like this author, Noval Harari, what's his name?
Harari, Yuval Harari, I think.
Exactly. Well, somebody gave me a copy of his first book, which was called Sapiens. And then there's a second book called Homo Deus. And so I read these and I said, okay, this is, interesting information, not inaccurate, tracing mankind and evolution of technology. Okay, that's great. But it's like these things were breakthroughs by an original thinker. But it was just a recantation of what I consider to be common knowledge. And then I thought, what happens? And it turns out, I just discovered this, that Harari is Klaus Schwab's #1 butter boy. I mean, he's like the in-house court intellectual for the World Economic Forum. And for that reason, of course, because he's got all the wrong ideas and the wrong philosophy in back of those ideas, he's presented as a leading world intellectual. But, he's wrongheaded and unoriginal and a nobody, but he says the right things. It's like the last time that I noticed this happened. It was that Japanese American guy that wrote, who am I thinking of, that wrote the end of, what was his name?
Right.
I'll think of the name of his stupid book.
Well, what was it about him?
I wish I'd written this down beforehand. The guy wrote a book, basically said that the whole world had changed, that democracy had conquered when the Soviet Union fell. He said that the theme of the book was that now that democracy and fascist-style capitalism have been proven to be winners with the fall of the Soviet Union, we were in a new era. What the hell was his name? He's still out there. But every once in a while, there's a court intellectual that his book is reviewed everywhere. New York Times, New York Review of Books, London Review of Books, Atlantic Monthly, everywhere. And everybody says, oh, this is a new genius. We must listen to him. And when that happens, I don't believe in conspiracies for all kinds of reasons. But that makes me believe in conspiracies, that these bad guys promote their own. And it makes sense, actually, because I'm not a conspiratorial person simply because I'm interested in the physical world more than I am in manipulating other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess there are people out there that are professional manipulators of other people that naturally get into conspiracies, and they tend to be pretty good at them because that's their main concentration in life. It's manipulating other people. So anyway.
Exactly. And well, I mean, I as a more conspiratorial minded person, I would say that this is just another example of our leaders being selected. So Harari was just plucked out and made like the best-selling author of of the decade, and his ideas were so profound and interesting, and everyone needed to study and talk about him. And I would say the same thing happens with all of our politicians. I just feel like I just feel like they're selected, not elected.
Exactly, and the name of that book I'm thinking of is called "The End of History."
Of course.
What a stupid title! The End of History, where everything is going to be cool and stable from now on.
What an idiot. That's amazing. Yeah, I've seen the title of that book, but I've never read it.
But he's still out there circulating in the Washington, D.C. think tanks. And Washington, D.C., that's the other thing. You don't hear much about the truckers these days, but what's going on?
Right. The last thing I heard, I saw this morning that one of the truckers in this convoy was reporting that they had, from the front truck to the last truck in the convoy, that they were basically just circulating the beltway around DC, which is 62 miles, that loop, the beltway right around there. And that the last truck in the convoy was ahead, just right in front of the first truck in the convoy, which basically means they have a 62-mile convoy of trucks there now, and it's getting no public press at all. And honestly, I'm not sure what they hope to accomplish with it. I know they're motivated by what the Canadian truckers did. But it just, I worry so much more, at least in the US, about false flag stuff and, about it just having these people getting their lives destroyed in the same way that a lot of those Canadian truckers, were targeted, insurance canceled, trucks taken. So anyway, but there's a total blackout in news about it. You just can't find out anything about it.
Well, and of course, they can't go into DC proper because I understand that the Capitol has barricaded itself off for the protection of our overlords. If they actually went into DC, their license numbers would be taken down. They'd go into computer banks, and who knows how that would come back to bite them in the future.
Yep. Yeah, it really would. I mean, I respect the energy behind it, but I also, it's Sisyphus, carrying, a load forever and never solving anything. It just doesn't.
Well, I don't know what we can do about it, quite frankly, because as has been proven throughout history, once a group gets control of the government and decides to keep control of the government, I mean, it's hard to get rid of them. The Bolsheviks in 1917, perfect example. Castro in 1959, perfect example. Mao in 1949, another example. Once they get control of the apparatus of the state, they can hold down any attackers.
Yeah, and clearly the rule of law is well, we talked about this on Friday too, with the seizing of some of these yachts of the oligarchs, with the freezing of the bank accounts of of people who gave $25 to the Canadian truckers. The rule of law, it really always has been, just for the plebs. It really always has been just for us. But it's never been so in your face as it is now, where if the laws aren't working for the powers that be, they make an emergency situation where then the laws don't apply, or they issue new executive orders.
For the good of the public or for national security, there's no getting around it. And it's really gotten quite out of control. I mean, I'm still shocked that Klaus actually said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And he was talking about his ideal world in 2030, which is only 8 years hence.
Right. And what's even more impressive is that, as far as I know, there have been no attacks on his life. There's been no assassination attempts on Klaus Schwab yet. Supposedly Zelensky has had 3 assassination attempts, but no one at all. Not one has gone after Klaus. That's amazing.
Well, Zelensky is not a good guy as far as I'm concerned.
He's not.
But it is odd. The only people that are getting killed these days are poor blacks in the inner city. If you're a member of the elite, you're pretty safe.
Pretty safe. Yep.
It's oh well. I don't know what's to be done about it, but the temperature of the pot of the pressure cooker is just starting to really get higher with
yeah.
So we'll know a lot more when summer comes to the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we've been obviously talking about this sort of same thing, for 177 of these episodes. I mean, basically the same thing. And, things have become increasingly worse, increasingly more difficult, increasingly more precarious, at least the economy has. And, I think that, it's becoming, I think that there's still a window of opportunity where people can do things to improve their, to put a buffer between them and the worst that could happen. And that buffer could be like, for us, we're spending obviously a lot of time here in Uruguay, for instance. There's not that I actually believe there's going to be a nuclear war, but if there were, unlikely it would affect us here. So that's just an example of things. Making sure you have some food on hand. If food prices are doubling and tripling, if you buy some extra earlier on, if nothing else, if you're going to eat it later anyway, it's just a savings. It's like just buying it at a discount today. But there are things, and getting money out of some of the banks, maybe. I don't know, but buying gold. But people have to start taking more action, I think, while they can. And I don't think most people, and even in our Telegram group, Doug, a lot of people are totally on the same page with all this, and yet I notice a real serious lack of action on people's part to do anything to improve their situation or to prepare themselves. And
well, that's very disappointing. That's very disappointing if that's true on an individual basis, but on a collective basis, there's really not much we can do about it. I mean, there have been groups that have been formed, like, I guess, the Proud Boys. Whatever happened to them? The reputation,
the leaders in prison.
Yeah, so it's really tough to put together an organization of people trying to counter what's going on with the people that control the apparatus of the state. It's very tough. So the best thing you can do is keep things sub rosa and look out for number 1.
Yep, I agree. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now, Doug. And I'm sure by Wednesday, who knows what could happen. And we might be talking about a total collapse of the money system by Wednesday at this rate.
Anything could happen. But, even with gold now at $2,000 per ounce, it's still a good thing to own, but especially 1 ounce silver coins, I think.
I agree. Okay. All right. If you can get them, go buy them. We'll talk to you on Wednesday, Doug. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, man.